Welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at this camera here. This is the Turnigy HD Wi-Fi 1080p camera. Now you can get this in two variants. You can get it with and without Wi-Fi. This is the one that we've got here that has it. So have a look at the HobbyKing website. I'll put a link in the description below to both different versions. In this video what we're going to do is take a look at this camera and we'll compare and contrast it with some other popular models on the market. There's starting to be an awful lot of this class of camera around, so it's worthwhile us doing a little bit of comparison both with the iSaw Air. We'll have a look at that in another video in a little bit more detail, and also comparing it to a Hero 3 GoPro. Now we're comparing some very different cameras here. You know, the GoPro is a couple of £100 worth of equipment, and these are both sub £80–90, and you get an awful lot more with them. But these are more sensible options to put into those craft that you might have more spectacular crashes in, particularly those things like the HobbyKing Cloud Surfer. Now we actually use this camera in the nose of our Cloud Surfer and it works really well. And I'm happy putting this in the nose of something like a big plane like that, because when it crashes, the thing that's going to get destroyed is hopefully the bubble that's covering the camera. But if the camera takes a hit and gets damaged, then we're talking about a £60–70 camera as opposed to me destroying a couple of £100 GoPro. So we'll look at the features first of all, then we'll go through using it, and we'll actually then compare the performance. We'll actually put all three of these cameras on a rig and do some filming. The video should be interesting because today the weather is absolutely horrible. It's grey, it's overcast, so we'll see how all of these cameras manage in that kind of light, and then finally we'll do our summary. The camera itself comes in this big box, and it actually comes pre-installed in a waterproof case. So let me take everything out of this box here and you'll see all the stuff that comes with it, because you get an awful lot of mounts and different options which you don't get with some of the more expensive cameras. But for those of us who want to use it on all kinds of things like dash cameras or motorbike handlebars or pedal bike handlebars or FPV craft, we have a lot of choices. So let me just unpack this and I'll show you what we get. The answer is you do get a lot with the camera. So the first thing we'll take a look at then is our friend, the waterproof enclosure. This is very similar to the kind that you get with a GoPro. You'll notice it'll be slightly deeper though. This camera is a little bit thicker than a standard GoPro, but then the standard GoPro, particularly one I've got, doesn't have things like a nice screen on the back. So that's part of it with a mount. So that's a nice piece to get in the kit. You get a polishing cloth and you get a manual. They're pretty boring, we'll put them to the side, but we'll look at them later. You get a USB cable to connect it to your PC, and then you get into the mounts, which is the good stuff. So you have this mount here, which is a clip-on mount, which also allows you to connect the camera in kind of a skeleton style onto the top of a tripod, so that's nice. Not sure you'd want to put it in your pocket, but if you want to clip it onto the strap or something like a backpack or something like that, that'll be useful for that. You also have a couple of sticky mounts here, put it on flat surfaces, so there's two of those in the pack as well, and that fits the clip that's at the bottom of the enclosure. Then we have lots of different adapters, different offsets, so again that's fits into those clips we've just looked at, but this has kind of a swan neck on it. Then we have a much more simple version that is for mounting onto a tripod. We have an extension piece. You've got a piece that will then extend it, but they'll rotate it through 90 degrees. You've got a nice little handlebar setup here. Then you have another little 90-degree converter, but this is very compact. And then you have a load of Velcro. So now we've looked at all the different pieces, it's worthwhile us talking about the main features of the camera. Now you can tell with it being Turnigy, they have put a bit of thought and effort into trying to make this easier to use in remote control. The battery itself plugs into the bottom. You pull this tab and then the battery door comes open. But once you've got the door open, then you can pull the battery out. It is replaceable. It's a battery that will give you more than about an hour of continuous use, so that's nice. It's field replaceable. Little thing that goes over the top to keep it in there. Put that in. The feel of the camera is quite nice. It is nowhere near as heavy as something like a GoPro. We'll measure it when we get to that point later in the video. The Resolution is 1080p. It'll only do 30 frames a second, but it'll do 60 frames a second in 720p. The screen on the back is quite nice. Let me power it up and show you. So that allows us to do all of our setup. We have a video mode. We also then have a camera mode, and then we also have a playback mode. And then you have a menu that gives you all the settings, and this is really nice. You can do all the settings here on the actual machine itself without having to rely on a PC or something else. There are no front LEDs, so you can see on the back of this that we have a blue LED to show that we're on. If I start recording, you can see the blue LED flashing away. There's no indication at the front or at the sides that we're actually recording. It does also support FPV out, so we can pop an FPV cable into the USB connector at the side. So we have a HDMI connector to connect up to things like goggles or TVs. We have a USB connector to charge the thing, and that also provides us with an AV out, and we have a little micro SD card slot here at the side. The other nice feature this does have, it does allow us to connect to the camera and use Wi-Fi. So if I click on these two buttons at the side here, this top one has a little Wi-Fi icon. Then it'll tell me that it's going to show Wi-Fi, and there is all my details. I can connect to that on an Android or a Apple device, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit more detail later on. So now we've had that quick whistle-stop tour, let's talk a little bit more about actually using this day to day. So the first thing we'll talk about then when we're actually using the camera is how much this little guy weighs. So thank you to my wife for lending me the kitchen scales. What we're going to do is pop each of them on this. It's only going to be accurate to a gram, but it'll give you an idea. So the first thing we'll do then is we'll actually weigh our Turnigy. So it's 63 grams. Then for the GoPro, we have 73 grams, and for the iSaw Air we have about 69 grams. So this is a little bit lighter than the GoPro. You need to be aware of that when you're actually putting it in place of a GoPro, if you already have one of those already. You also need to be aware that if you're buying GoPro gimbals, it is slightly thicker. The actual size around the rest of it is pretty much identical. The only challenge that you have is because of that thickness and the reduced weight. If you're popping it in a gimbal, just think about that when you're putting it in. So let's talk about how you actually use it and talk about all these buttons on the case. So there isn't a huge amount of buttons actually on this thing. There is a power button at the front. That's also going to change the modes. We have a start-stop button that also acts as an OK. We have an up-down button to navigate through the menus. The top button, as we've already seen, starts the wireless, and that's it. So to power it on, we press and hold the power button. We get that little noise, and then we're in business. So it is quite a quick start. You just hold the button for a second or so and then it turns on. To turn it off, you press and hold that button again. It'll start in the default video mode. Then to change the modes, all you do is you press that button at the front once. Will take me into photo mode, and we get the nice shutter sound as we take a photo. Yeah. And then you press it again to go into playback mode, which is there. We're just looking at the picture we just took. Press it once more, will take you into the settings menu. Now the settings menu is pretty good. You navigate up and down using the up and down buttons. And then the stuff you want to change, you click OK, and then it gives you kind of the sub options. So there are our options for the 1080p and then the two versions of the 780p, and then we can go into smaller versions as well. You pick the one you want, you click OK, and then you're back into the menu. So that's pretty straightforward. To come out of it, we just click the front button again and we're back into video mode. It does allow you, as we've talked about, to put a video signal out the side for FPV. What you need to do is you need to get yourself one of these cables here. This is the link on HobbyKing. I've obviously edited mine a little bit, so I've crimped a connector onto the end that plugs into my Fat Shark stuff, and what I've done here is I've actually crimped it so that it has the power, ground and the video signal, which is the white wire, and that works perfectly with my Fat Shark equipment. The thing I would say about that though is that this wire is a little bit stiff, and when you pop it into the side of the camera it does stick out a little way. So you need to be aware of that when you're going to use the camera. Now, as you saw, the screen actually does go dark to save on the battery. The way you actually set this up so you get the FPV signal out the side is you have to go into menu to TV out. Now TV out, if we select that, we can select on or off. If I select on, which I'm just going to click the top button and say OK, watch what happens. Unfortunately, it takes away the back image. So the only way I can do this now, I can turn it on and off and we'll get it back. Turn it on again. Okay, we're back in business. But by default, it's not putting the signal out. Now, this is the one thing that out this camera is the thing that I'd probably draw your attention to at the top of the list. For FPV users, one, I'm not sure I'd use this for FPV. The latency is kind of like all the other cameras. You're talking a very slight delay between the image being captured by the camera and it appearing in your FPV goggles, and that's the same with all of the cameras that we're looking at here, that if this is something you want to fly with as your FPV camera, you don't want to be using this on things that you're going to be flying near other people or property. You want this ideally on large craft that are soarers, where a delay of 120, 150 milliseconds isn't going to spell disaster. I use this as a secondary camera on the FPV kit. I actually fly with a board camera, and this is there to record in HD. But you do need to remember, if you're going to connect it to some FPV equipment so you can look at the image through your goggles, either through a video switcher or something else, then you're going to have to set up that TV out every time, because unfortunately, two things: one, the camera doesn't remember it from the last time you set it up, and secondly, it also turns off the back screen. So once it does turn on, then you have to rely on your FPV goggles to change your settings unless you cycle the power. So now we've talked about that, let's actually put this on the rig with the other two cameras and take it out and do some video and see how it actually performs against the iSaw Air and also the GoPro. So as I've said, the conditions are going to be challenging for these cameras. It's very overcast, it's blowing a gale, and we even have a bit of rain here too. So this is the Turnigy camera at the top, we have the iSaw at the bottom left hand corner, and then on the bottom right hand corner we have our GoPro Hero 3. Now I'm going to run these together because we've synchronized them all, and what I'd like to do is kind of just draw your attention to a couple of things. One is how well the camera is handling the transitions from a very light sky down to a very overcast area, and how quickly it's taking care of that. Colour saturation is okay on all the cameras. I'd probably say that the iSaw Air and the GoPro Hero 3 are probably the closest in terms of how it looked naturally on the day. We're a little bit blue with the Turnigy, but that's something that can be sorted out. You will notice that we are picking up a couple of smudges on a few of the lenses, and that's just due to the rain and the moisture in the air. So any of these will work great for a camera to pop on a model to capture the flight in stunning high definition. So the next thing we'll do is pop back to the desk. Let's fire up the Wi-Fi pieces on this Turnigy HD Wi-Fi camera, and we'll show you where to get the applications from, how to connect, and what you can do with those apps. So a quick tip before we look at the Wi-Fi stuff to kind of show you what the internals are actually running in here. If we turn this little guy on, and then press the button so to get to the menu, and then go right to the bottom of the menu and select version, you can see here that we're actually running SJ4000 Wi-Fi firmware. Now the reason that's important is because a lot of the things that we're about to have a look at are actually from the SJ4000 series of cameras. So that's something to be aware of. It also means that because it's running that firmware, you can go to this web address and you can download firmware upgrades that should work with this camera. There isn't a firmware upgrade available right now, but when things change in the future and improvements are made, this is where you can go and get it. So if we go back to the desk, let's talk about setting Wi-Fi up, because some of the things we're going to look at will be very familiar if you know SJ4000 cameras or you've used them before. So this is the camera as we're ready to go. Now to turn on Wi-Fi is pretty straightforward. As we said before, we're going to press this top button. Now be careful, if you press and hold the top button, what actually happens, you are operating a digital zoom. There we go, we're zooming in on the top of my iPhone, and if you press the bottom button, it's a digital zoom back out as well. What you need to do is just press it very quickly and let go. And then it'll turn on the Wi-Fi stuff. It'll give you your SSID and also the default password, which by default is 123456778. Then what you do is you fire up your Android or Apple device and you connect to that wireless network and then give it that password. And then once you have that connection to the wireless network that's coming out the back of the camera, which I do now, you can start the application. Now the application itself you can get hold of on the back of the manual. There are two QR codes, one for Android and one for iOS. For simplicity, I'm going to put the links in the description as well. The Android one, you want to go onto Google Apps and you want to search for something called SJCam HD. That's the application you want. For iOS, you want to search for something slightly different. You want the SJ Versatile Camera app, and that's the one that we're going to use here on my device. So let me pop the camera down, let me start the SJ Camera app. Here we go. And if you're not connected, then it'll tell you to connect to the device at the top. And there we're at live video out, looking at my camera. You can see there is a little bit of lag. It's Wi-Fi, so you wouldn't want to try and fly FPV with this, because not only is it awfully laggy, but you'll only probably get about 50 feet before you'll lose your video. But it does mean that you can change the settings, you can change the mode, and you can also do cute things like you can start and stop recording from this as well. So there's us recording. There's us stopped, and that's a really nice feature. The thing that I find best about this is when I have this kind of thing mounted on the peak of my cap and I'm flying for flying video. This is a great way to make sure that it's pointed in roughly the right direction and I've got the cap on straight. So now we've seen the video, hopefully that's going to make sense. We've looked at the actual camera itself, how it's working, what the features are. We've looked at the buttons, we've looked at how you use it for FPV, how you set it up for Wi-Fi, and how it compares in practice with some of the other cameras in this category. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.